So welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today Ralph Ellis is back, and our subject will be the origins of astrotheology. So, Ralph, welcome. Thanks for coming. I hope I didn't screw up your schedule too much.
No, glad to be back with you, Judith. I've been very busy, which is why I've not been on the channel for a while. Um, Lots of things happening. I started using my X account, which I've not really done before,
Mhm.
and getting a lot of feedback from X, and that's been quite a good platform. And then I went through four of my books so far and put them onto Audible. Well, not actually Audible because they wouldn't accept them, but the Google equivalent of Audible. So if anyone's interested in speaking books, audio books, then they're on Google now. But for some reason, I wanted to put them onto Audible, which is the Amazon equivalent. And they said, oh, no, it's not a real person. We can't take it.
Hmm?
I found that strange because the Google automatic system is
Hmm.
actually probably a better voice than I have. Um, I mean, my voice is very good, but I'm not always consistent when I'm reading from a book. And their text to speech on Google was exceptional. It was really good, although it struggled with a lot of the strange foreign names, of course, that I have in my books. And so I had to do an awful lot of correcting of the foreign names because it could not pronounce them. So it was taking about 2.5 weeks per book to put them onto an audio system. But that was good anyway. So that kept me
Yeah,
busy for quite some time.
yeah. So I looked up today what Wikipedia and others have to say about astrotheology, and Wikipedia said something along the lines of, yeah, it's a mixture of space science and classical theology. And then others say it is the worship of planets. So what say you?
I would say it is the very formation of all religions.
Okay.
So all religions come from astrotheology. That is what the people looked to in ancient times. They looked to the heavens above, um, because they knew the heavens were above were important. Obviously, you can track the months, you can track the seasons, you can track the millennia through the movement of the stars. And these moving stars that wander through the night sky, the actual planets, have always been used for divination. People knew that their paths were important, and it became the foundation of all theology. There might be a very esoteric reasoning for that. Um, we will go through precession later on, but one of the things they were tracking was precession, which is the wobble of the earth. We will have a look at that. Well, I wonder if we can have a look at that now since we're just doing this. Um, I'm sorry, I'm just looking for some images. That's
Hmm.
the reason for the slight delay. So, oh gosh, we're on Zoom. So how do we do share now? Share
The
screen. There
green
we go.
button.
That's always, yeah. We hit the share screen and that should do it. So I want that one and share. Now you should come up with a triangle there, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we don't want that image. We want that image. And hopefully that will move. Is that going to move or is it not? No, it's not. That's supposed to be a GIF or a GIF, and it's supposed to actually rotate.
Yeah.
But anyway, you get the idea. You've got the Earth and you've got the poles, and the poles actually rotate because the Earth, it wobbles on its axis as it's going around like a gyroscope. That's precession of the equinox. And that's what it gives us. Let me make that a bit bigger. So again, we've got the Earth in the middle, and you have the two planes. You have the plane of the Earth, which is this one. Can you see my
Yes, I
cursor
can
going
see.
around? Yeah, that's the celestial equator. That's the equivalent of the equator of the Earth moved out into space. That's the celestial equator. And then the other one is the ecliptic equator, which has all of the signs of the zodiac on it. And obviously they're at a difference between the two of about 22 degrees at present. And that's the wobble of the Earth. And as the Earth wobbles, it changes the constellations every 2,240 years. You get a different constellation is dominant in the night sky. And that's the precession of the equinox. And that has been a fundamental thing that's been venerated, you might say, studied perhaps or venerated for thousands of years. And we have evidence of that. Where should we go to first of all? Well, let's go to Stonehenge, which just sort of shows you how ancient all of this study is. So, oh, no, didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that. So on the left again, we have this image of the Earth, which is wobbling in space. And as it wobbles in space, it will draw out this circle in the heavens above, which is the where the North Pole will point over thousands of years. So that yellow circle that it's describing there, that yellow circle takes 26,000 years to draw out. 2240 times 12, yeah, 26,800 years roughly, to draw that big yellow circle in the heavens above, which is the position that the North Pole will point at. Obviously, at present, the North Pole is pointing at Polaris here at the top, but it can go all the way around that big circle. Now, that's exactly what we see on Stonehenge. So,
okay.
If you regard the stone circle in the center as being the Earth, the north one is not so clear, but to the north, we obviously have this ditch, with this henge, this ditch and bank henge that goes around Stonehenge. That's original. This is from the same period as Stonehenge itself. And then inside, you get these two circles, these two smaller henges, one above, one below. And they represent, in my estimation, the ecliptic circle in the heavens above, this yellow circle. And that's what they were drawing on the plains of Stonehenge thousands of years ago, whenever Stonehenge was actually created. And these circles are the same size relatively as the ecliptic circle will be pointing in the heavens. You can calculate the number of degrees of the heavens above that these circles represent, and it's the same size. It's 22.5 degrees times 2, which is what that will be. The angle of inclination of the Earth being 22 degrees, roughly 22.4, I think it is. So you can see that people have been venerating the heavens above for millennia. This is not a new thing that was developed, in the last 2,000 years or so. This has been going on forever. The gods inhabited the heavens above, and that's what all the stories of the gods were about. Ra going back to Egypt, Ra sailed on his solar boat across the heavens above. This was the original Ark of Noah, as it were, as it went across the heavenly seas, because the seas above were regarded as a sea. As above, so below. So we have a sea below, and you have a sea above in the heavens above. And that's where Ra sailed his boat. And I had a picture of this somewhere.
Of
Oh,
Ra?
there. Okay, so I'm going to come out of this share. So I will stop sharing. And I will reshare another one, because the picture is in a different place for some reason. Don't know why it is. So I'm sharing again. And there we go. We've got an Egyptian image. This is Nut and Geb. Again, this goes back to the very beginning of Egyptian history. Nut is the sky goddess, and she's arching her body across the heavens above. And Geb is the earth god. He's the earth down below. And you can see the Ark of Ra, the boat of Ra sailing across the heavens above. And that's how they envisaged the sun going across the sky during the day and then down through the underworld during the night. That was the diurnal passage of the sun. But who was Nut? Well, Nut, of course, was the Milky Way.
Basically.
And you
But
can
the depiction itself, I can't help myself, but with Nut and Geb, that one, it reminds me also of sex. I'm sorry.
well, sorry, it probably does. There was an element of that in it, in that the sun, when the sun set, it was eaten by Nut, and then it was born again at the dawn. So there was an element, a sexual element there. But yes, everything in Egyptian theology was to do with sex as well. And it also to do with duality. Everything was male, female. Now, the Egyptians would have a problem now because we've got 72 genders instead of two. And so you would have to have 70 Nuts and Gebs or something. I don't know how that works. But the Egyptians realized there were two genders. And so everything was male and female. For every male god, there was a female goddess. There was duality throughout everything in Egypt. And of course, we have the wonderful duality here of Nut and Geb. And in the solar boat, quite often in the solar boat of Ra, you had all of the gods and goddesses, and all of them in animal headdress, because they were all represented by animals, like Thoth being the ibis and so on. And they were all again male and female, the animals two by two in the Ark of Ra, sailing across the heavenly seas. It's the same story as we get with the Noah story. But Nut especially, you can see this is Nut, and she even has arms and legs. Here's her two legs coming down here. So it was quite obvious that they were looking at the Milky Way as this heavenly goddess who was Nut. And when we come across into Greek legend, this was the what did they call it? The foam of the sea. So when you have Isis, Isis is obviously, she was a moon goddess mostly, but also she was Venus. So Isis became Aphrodite, became Astarte, became eventually Venus, same goddess, the Roman Venus. But in Greece, she was known as Aphrodite, which means the foam of the sea. And that's caused some confusion with some scholars because they don't understand astrotheology. and they're wondering why Aphrodite should. That's why. Do I have Aphrodite? I'm just looking for an image
You
of.
mean the Venus image where she is standing in a shell?
Yeah, she's standing in the shell. You know it. It's very, a
Mm.
very, very well known depiction of Aphrodite. Aphrodite. She's standing in a seashell in the foam of the sea, because that's what her name means. But of course,
Mm.
that's a mistranslation, because what they didn't realize is this is the foam of the sea. It's
Mhm.
the Milky Way above, was because the heavens are the seas, and this is the foam of the sea. This is like you get on a seashore. And so they were talking about the Milky Way, and they were talking about Venus being born in the Milky Way, which she does on occasions. The Venus will actually pass, as it were, through the Milky Way on its journey in its orbit around the sun. And
Mm.
so you can track when Venus is actually in the Milky Way. And
Mm.
that probably gave some celebration dates that they could use. You know, when Venus was superimposed upon the Milky Way, that was probably her celebration date.
Mm.
But we still have the same traditions even now, but we don't even realize it. So in the modern world, I say that the Milky Way was the wicked witch from Snow White.
Yeah.
So, what is the story of Snow White? It's a story about a princess, Snow White princess, who is followed by seven dwarfs, the seven planets,
Mhm.
and of course, Aphrodite, Venus. Okay, she also was an aspect of the moon. Okay, she is Venus, but she was regarded. Isis was regarded as the moon as well. And the moon, the Snow White moon, is followed across the heavens by the seven dwarf moons, the seven planets, because they all follow the ecliptic. They don't go randomly across the skies, they all follow in the same path, the same as the seven dwarfs do. And this
Mm.
is what I think the Snow White story was based upon. And so, as a part of that story, it's a Germanic story, isn't it? I'm sure it comes out of Germany. It was part of the Grimm's, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Grimm's fairy
exactly.
tales.
Grimm's, yeah.
The
I have a
Brothers Grimm.
question concerning Venus. And I'm talking about the planet now, yeah. And we have depictions. If you look at very ancient depictions of Venus, then you see a very voluptuous woman, yeah.
Yes.
And then, of course, a little bit later, we have the one she dropped a few pounds, and then
Mhm.
she's standing in the seashell. And then these days, we have Venus depicted as a skinny Englishman in a Netflix TV show.
Oh, I've not seen that one, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, they with Lucifer.
they're sex swapping everything nowadays in these stupid
Yeah,
shows. I
yeah.
try not to watch any of them. It's all getting too stupid for words.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I thought, that this development is really interesting from a very voluptuous woman to a skinnier woman, and then they exchanged the male for the female.
Well, this is exactly what happens in Snow White, of course. This is why I
Mm.
think Snow White is part of this story, because remember, the Wicked Witch, who I think is the Milky Way, is jealous of Snow White moon because she is brighter, much brighter than the Milky Way. And so she gives Snow White moon a corset, and she puts the corset on her and pulls her tighter and tighter and tighter. And of course, that is exactly what happens to the moon as the moon approaches the sun. We get the crescent moon. She gets thinner and thinner and thinner as she approaches the sun. And eventually, and the sun being the sun prince, of course. So as she approaches the sun prince, she actually dies. The moon will die. She goes completely black until she kisses the moon. Sorry, she kisses the sun. So as soon as the moon kisses the sun, i.e., Snow White kisses the prince, the charming prince, and then they have a marriage in flagrante delicto, I think they call it, with the diamond ring of marriage in a solar eclipse. And then after that, of course, the Snow White moon comes back to life again. She starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger again as she goes away from the sun. And that essentially is the story of Snow White. That's what happens in Snow White. But again, of course, you see the moon can either be the voluptuous round moon, or she can be the thin crescent moon. It's exactly the same. And these stories, I think, have been told and retold down through the ages. And they're all very interesting. And it's all to do with essentially astrotheology, but a lot of this has been buried for centuries and centuries because it was disagreed with by the Catholic Church. They didn't want anything to do with it, even though originally, that's what I'm looking for. Originally, this was all a part of standard Judaism. So I'm not sure if we've talked about this, the zodiac in Judaism. Did we talk about this? I can't remember.
No, not yet.
Okay. It's a little known thing that the primary symbol of Judaism used to be the zodiac, which shows you how intimate astrotheology was with ancient religion. Because
But not in current Judaism.
Sorry?
Not in current Judaism.
Not in current, yes, but we've only lost this in the last 2,000 years. Before then, it was, it was very current. And if I just pick up this one again and share this one. So during the first century, this zodiac, which is on the Sea of Galilee, and it's in a synagogue, is the Hamat Tavera's zodiac on the Sea of Galilee. And it's a very interesting, we can actually learn quite a lot about this particular zodiac. So it's in a synagogue just to the south of Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee. And it was owned by Jesus of Gamala Sapphires. And the thing is that Jesus of Gamala was the leader of 600 rebel fishermen. Now, who in the first century was the rebel leader of fishermen? We're coming back to the gospel story again here. And so it's a standard zodiac, the same as you would see in any newspaper today, pretty much. It's got all the same symbols. Obviously, the constellations are marked in Aramaic because Galilee was mainly Aramaic speaking. And in the center, even more incongruously, we've got Helios, the sun god. So this is a Jewish zodiac. It was owned by Jews. The dedication down below shows all the Jews who paid for this temple, this synagogue, and this zodiac. And above this, you can't see it obviously in this picture, but you've got the Temple of Jerusalem, you've got the Ark of the Covenant and the shofar, all of the accoutrements of Judaism. So this is a Judaic zodiac. But in the center, they've got the Greeks, Helios, the sun god. So this was highly heretical. And that's why I'm pretty sure, because if you look at the history books, they'll say this is 3rd century. But for many reasons, I am pretty sure that this is actually 1st century, because you'll see that Helios, the head of Helios, is pointing at the conjunction between Aries and Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were talking about precession before, and precession makes the constellations change every 2,200 years or so. And so we know from looking at a planisphere, looking at the night sky, that Aries turned to Pisces in AD 10 at the beginning of the 1st century. That's why we changed the calendar at that time. So everyone thinks we're saying, you know, we're in 2024 Anno Domini after Jesus, but it wasn't. It's 2024 of the great month of Pisces. So when the great month of Aries turned into the great month of Pisces in AD 10. And that's a known astronomical event. And Helios is pointing at that conjunction. So we can be pretty sure that this is a 1st century zodiac. At least it's representing a 1st century picture. But we have, and I'm the first person to have noticed this, we have a story from Josephus Flavius that mentions this zodiac. So Josephus Flavius in AD 66, he became the army commander in charge of Galilee. And he was sent by the Jerusalem authorities to destroy the heretical images of animals that were in the palace four furlongs south of Tiberias. And if you go 4 furlongs south of Tiberias, you come to this zodiac with its heretical images of animals. And he was actually sent to destroy this zodiac. And so we have a meeting here between history, written history, and archaeological history. And so Josephus was sent to destroy this zodiac. But before he got there, Jesus of Gamala burnt the palace down so he couldn't see it.
Mm.
And the question then is, did the zodiac survive? And these mosaics were inordinately expensive, but they didn't want anyone to see it because the penalty for having these images of animals was death. So that's probably why Jesus burnt the palace down. But if he had covered up the zodiac before burning the palace down, you know, just covered it in earth or sand or whatever, then it would have survived.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reason I think that this was a 1st century zodiac that belonged to Jesus of Gamala. And of course, I say that Jesus of Gamala was the biblical Jesus.
Mm.
Because remember, it was Jesus of Gamala who married Mary Bothus, who is Mary Magdalene.
Yeah. So, okay, I know this is Helios in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
but let's say somebody looks at this and doesn't know anything about what you just explained. I could imagine that some people would think that this is a depiction of Jesus.
Mm.
Yeah, with a halo. And is that the earth in the hand?
Yes, what he has in his hand is even more interesting. No, it is Helios, and I know where you're coming from because yes, it is Jesus. He's actually sitting on a quadriga chariot pulled by 4 horses. We know this because there are other. This is not the only one. There are about 6 of these in Judea, and so Helios is sitting on his chariot, just as he normally does. And yes, this is the Jesus character sitting in the center of his 12 constellations, Jesus and his 12 disciples. we know this from Arthurian legend, because Arthurian legend is very interesting because it concentrates on Joseph of Arimathea and first century events. And it says that there were 3 round tables. You remember the round table of Arthur, of course.
Yeah.
The first round table was the Last Supper table of Jesus. So it was a round table, not a rectangular one, as we see in the Leonardo drawing. And the second table was the round table of Joseph of Arimathea and his 12 disciples. And the third round table was the round table of King Arthur and his 12 knights. So Jesus and his 12 disciples at his round table is exactly the same as Arthur and his 12 knights of Arthurian legend. And they sat around a round table. Now, what I'm saying in my books is that round table was not a table. Because remember, in the East, you don't sit at tables, you sit on the floor. You have a cushion, and you take your cushion and you sit down to dinner on your cushion. So in which case, this is the round table of King Arthur, and it's the round table of King Jesus. So King Jesus would have sat in the center because he was the Helios character, as you say, with the halo. He is the kingly character, the Jesus character, surrounded by his 12 disciple constellation knights. So each disciple of Jesus would have been represented by a particular constellation, one that suited their particular character, maybe. You know, as you know, some constellations are supposed to be peaceful and some are more fiery and all sorts of different things they say for the constellation. So you would choose a constellation that suited your character, and the 12 disciples would sit around this table on their cushions with Jesus in the center having their Last Supper meal. So this is the Last Supper table, not the one that was depicted by Leonardo. This was the actual Last Supper table at which Jesus sat with his 12 disciples, the one from the Gospels. Yeah, here it is. This is what people have been looking for, you know, for 2,000 years. It's here. And they would have had their meal. And at the same time, of course, this was instructional, because while they're having the meal, you can point out the precession of the equinox, the constellations, how they look in the sky. You can go outside and have a look, see what the constellations look like. And this is the depictions of them, how they move, how the heavens move, how the planets move through the system. So it's a complete educational instruction board, as it were, so that the knights know what they're actually joining as a sort of Masonic type organization, a organization with secrets. And this is one of the secrets that they had and maintained in their close-knit community. Remember, Jesus was always speaking in parables. He spoke in parables so that the people wouldn't know what he's talking about. It was a secret society, and only the inner few knew what the parables meant. And one of the secrets is what he's holding in his hand. What does it look like?
It looks to me like the earth.
Yeah. So if we zoom in.
Okay.
This is Helios holding a sphere, a blue sort of blue-brown or blue-green sphere. And we know it's a sphere because on the left, it's illuminated. On the right, it's dark. Now, that would only happen with a sphere. So this is not a circle. He's not holding something circular. He's holding a sphere in his hand. And the lines of latitude and longitude are curved. That would only happen on a sphere. So in this first century mosaic, we have Helios holding a spherical Earth in his gravitational grasp. So they knew the heliocentric model of the solar system long before Copernicus or anyone else was talking about this. This is the heliocentric model of the solar system, writ large, with a circular blue, sort of blue-green, blue-brown Earth with lines of latitude and longitude on it. That's how much knowledge that they had of our solar system and the planets and the stars and everything else. So these are the secrets that they would have been passing on during these Last Supper meetings when they were sitting on this zodiac. That's the level of knowledge. And of course, this is all astrotheology again. And this was central to Judaism. Remember, this is a Jewish, Jesus was a Jew, although he was a Nazarene Jew, which I say is Egypto-Judaism, because a lot of his information came out of Egypt. Because in the Gospels and in the works of Josephus, he was known as the Egyptian false prophet. And it's pretty obvious that the Egyptian false prophet was the biblical Jesus. And this was the level of knowledge they had within that secret society, within his 12 disciples. Here's another one. This is, a lot of these have been beaten up, of course, but that is a zodiac. It doesn't look like a zodiac because most of it's been destroyed. This is the one at Huqoq. But you can see the chariot of Helios in the center. So this is what is missing from the other depiction. So that is Helios in his chariot of 4 horses here. And around the outside, these are the signs of the zodiac. So you can see a Capricorn here with the goat, Scorpio here with the scorpion. Don't know what that is anyway. Whatever's next to Scorpio, I don't know what is next to Scorpio. Anyway, so they are the signs of the zodiac. So this is another Jewish zodiac. You can see it, all the writing is in Aramaic still. At Huqoq, which is just to the northwest of Galilee. So there are quite a few of these things. Here's another one. This is the Sepphoris zodiac, again to the west of Galilee. And again, you can see this time we've got Helios, the sun, and the moon together. So we got the conjunction of the sun and the moon again, almost in an eclipse. So this is Helios, and you can see his chariot with his 4 horses down the bottom. Although Helios himself is not readily visible. I know it's a bit beaten up, this zodiac, but I think they're representing Helios just as the sun, not as a man, unless the man was here and he's been deleted. He could be sitting here. But anyway, you can see the signs of the zodiac. Here is Pisces. He's holding 2 fish here. Sagittarius over here, Scorpio. So again, another very fine mosaic. And these are large. These are not small zodiacs. These are like 4 or 5 meters across. This one is probably at least 5-6 meters across. So it's big. So when I say it's a table and you can sit at it, yeah, of course, it's 5 meters across. You can easily sit at this huge, great table and have your Last Supper meal. This is Mithras. I think everyone's probably heard of Mithras, but they probably don't know what Mithras represents. In fact, nobody knows. I think I'm the first person to have actually suggested this because everyone has got Mithras wrong. So this is Mithras killing the bull. And around the outside, these are the signs of the zodiac again. So again, very closely linked with the zodiac and the movements of the heavens above. You can see Scorpio here, Pisces here. That's Aries, of course, next to Pisces. Aquarius is next to Pisces. There we go. So all the normal signs of the zodiac. I got this from Arthurian legend. Arthurian legend is quite amazing. what it has, the information it contains within Arthurian legend. And one of the secrets in Arthurian legend is it just launches into this history of Pompey the Great. So this is how strange Arthurian legend is. King Arthur is supposed to be a 6th century king of Britain. And then in the middle of this story, we get this history of Pompey the Great, who was the compatriot of Julius Caesar, of course, in the 50s and 60s BC. And it says that Mithras came from Pompey the Great. Again, why Arthurian legend is concerned with this is a bit of a mystery, but anyway. So it says, and this is all true according to history, Arthurian legend says that Pompey the Great was made the admiral of the Mediterranean, which he was. It was the most powerful position within the Roman, well, it wasn't the empire at that point, the Roman Republic, I suppose. So he was made the admiral of the Mediterranean because of the pirates, the Pontus pirates, Pontus being modern Anatolia over in the east of the Mediterranean, who were raiding all of the ships around the Mediterranean, and they needed to stop all of these attacks on Roman ships. And so he formed the first navy, state-sponsored and funded navy, to go and attack the pirates, which he did. And he attacked them in Pontus in the east, and he attacked them in Gibraltar. But one of the things he found while he was attacking these pirates is the religion they followed, which was Mithras. But Mithras doesn't come from Mithra. It's nothing to do with Mithra over in Iran, modern Iran. They say that Mithras came from Mithridates VI, who was the king of Pontus that Pompey the Great was fighting over in what is modern Turkey. So that's where Mithras came from. It came from the Pontus pirates, who were fighting against the Romans this would have been in the 50s odd BC, which is an interesting history to Mithras. So what does Mithras represent in that case? Well, in this case, Mithras, as depicted here, you can see him killing the bull. Mithras is Orion, because in the night sky, Orion is fighting with Taurus. They're actually battling with each other in the night sky. I'll see if I've got an image of that to look at in a minute. And this is exactly the same. Do I have Gilgamesh? I've got so many images knocking around. No, I'll have to look up a quick image of Gilgamesh. Let's quickly do that.
While you are searching for it, when I looked at this, I mean, of course, I have seen it before, but I thought you could also look at it that somebody is putting an end to the age of Taurus.
Yes, which is exactly what it's doing.
Okay.
Yeah. That is, you've got it in one. That's exactly what is happening. He is killing Taurus to end the era of Taurus. So Taurus came to the end in 1750 BC. And the great month of Taurus ended, and the great month of Aries began. So the bull turned into sheep. And that's why we had the Hyksos shepherd kings, and why we had the biblical patriarchs who were all called shepherds, etc. Suddenly we went to sheep instead of bull herding. And that's exactly what Gilgamesh, Orion, is doing here. He is killing the great month of Taurus, and so we can have the great month of Aries. And yeah, Finder is not responding. It does this sometimes. when I'm on Zoom, it won't find images. So we might have to just imagine this. But anyway, this scene is exactly what you get in the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
So this is a very ancient imagery that I suppose in a way has come out of Persia, because obviously the Epic of Gilgamesh was from Babylon. But the Epic of Gilgamesh says that Gilgamesh, who was supposed to be a king, but he's not, he's a heavenly character. Like all of these stories, they're all astrotheology. They're all talking about the heavens above and the battles and the loves and the likes and the hates and of the gods in the heavens above, as we see obviously with Greek mythology, which is all about the gods above. But Gilgamesh is this kingly character in the heavens above who has an axe and a bow and a sword hanging from his belt. Who is that? Well, it's Orion, of course. And he's killing the great bull of heaven. And if you look on any planisphere, you will see Orion, who is right next to Taurus in the night sky. And Orion holds either, some people say, a shield in one of his hands, but you could say it's a bow because it's arced, a bow and arrow pointing at Taurus. He's about to kill Taurus. But Gilgamesh can't kill Taurus because Taurus, the great bull of heaven, is protected by the Humbaba. This is from the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the Humbaba is known as the six splendors of the Humbaba. And he has to destroy the six splendors of the Humbaba before he can kill the bull of heaven, before he can attack the neck of the bull of heaven. And of course, if you look at the neck of Taurus in the night sky, it has the Pleiades sitting on the neck of Taurus. And the Pleiades is the six splendors. It is the Humbaba. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is exactly the same as Mithras. It's the same scene with Orion killing the bull of heaven, Taurus, in order that we can then progress from the great month of Taurus into the great month of Aries. And that happened, and this is interesting because it gives us a date. That happened in 1750 BC. We know that because you can look on any planisphere and you can plot it and you can see when one changes to the other. So we can say, firstly, that Gilgamesh was a story about 1750 BC. So never mind all these stories about, oh, it was 3500 BC, because the Babylonians always exaggerated basically everything. They had kings that lived, for 500 years, all this sort of business. So now we can put a real date on the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was 1750 BC. And we can also say that the Romans were woefully out of date when they were venerating Mithras, because Mithras was 1700 years out of date by the time it got to Rome. So they should have been venerating the killing of sheep so that you can go from the great month of Aries into the great month of Pisces, which is why Jesus was born as a lamb of God, but became a fisher of men. He understood that you had to go from sheep to fish, which is why the symbol of Christianity became the fish. It was the great month of Pisces. So why the Romans were 1700 years out of date, I don't quite know. Maybe they just liked killing bulls or something, or maybe they didn't understand the processional astronomy or astrology that lay behind this scene and this story. Maybe they didn't understand it deeply enough, whereas Jesus obviously did, because if we go back to the Hamat zodiac, they obviously did understand, because they've got Helios pointing at the conjunction between Aries and Pisces, which is the 1st century AD, whereas Mithras would be pointing over here at the conjunction between Taurus and Aries. So they were a whole cosmic month out of date. And that cosmic month is 1750 years. It's a bit less with Aries, because Aries is a smaller constellation. Normally these months are 2,240 years, but Aries is a bit smaller, so it's only 1750. So yeah, that's all interesting. And again, it underscores the fact that all of these religions were cosmic in nature. They venerated the cosmos and the movements of the heavens. And this is true for Palmyra as well, one of my favorite places before ISIS blew it up. And so this is no more. I've got some of the last images of this, but I use this because it's easier to see. It was highly weathered even when I saw it back in 2008, I think it was, before the Syrian war and before ISIS came to the fore in that region. This was made of sandstone. It's on the roof as a huge, great block, one block that covered the whole of the roof of the Temple of Bel in Palmyra. Palmyra is out in the eastern desert of Syria to the northeast of Damascus. And this was the scene, and it had the signs of the zodiac. Obviously, you can see all the standard signs. And then in the center, we have the 7 planets. So we got 6 around the outside, and Jupiter, no, not Jupiter. Actually, yes, it might have been, yes, it was Jupiter in the middle. So not Venus in the middle, but Jupiter. Mercury up the top with his little wings and so on. So standard imagery. But again, they were venerating the zodiac. And the Temple of Bel, of course, I say was linked to Edessa, because this was owned by Edessa. They had this tract of land down in eastern Syria that went from Edessa, which is up by, well, it's modern Sanlurfa. It's right next to Göbekli Tepe. If anyone knows Göbekli Tepe, that's Edessa. It's right next door. And they owned this land all the way down eastern Syria, all the way down to Palmyra and maybe south of Palmyra. So this is one of their cities. And obviously they venerated the zodiac. And obviously in my other works we've discussed, I say that Jesus was a prince of Edessa. And that's why, of course, he's linked to the zodiac on the Sea of Galilee, the Hamat Tavera zodiac, because again, their primary symbolism was the zodiac and the cosmos and astrology, or we would call it today astronomy. So yes. Oh, here's my image of it. So that's the image that was drawn in the Victorian era when the Victorians went out there and drew it. This was what it looked like when I went there in 2008. And it's, as you can see, it's a bit battered and bruised, but you can see the 7 planets and you can just about make out the zodiac around the outside. But unfortunately, all of that is gone now. The barbarians of Islam came along with barrels of explosives, and they put them in the Temple of Bel, and they blew the whole place up. So this no longer exists. I was one of the last people to actually see it before it was blown to smithereens by the barbarians. But there we go. Something needs to be done about these barbarians. They are at the gate once more. We need another Charles Martel, basically. You know the history of Charles Martel?
No.
He chased the Muslims out of France when they they invaded the whole of Spain and got up to Tours, which is halfway sort of up France. And they were repulsed by Charles Martel, the brave heroes of European history. And then another little known thing, which is in my book about King Arthur, because in Arthurian legend, we have this parallel story about the Muslims coming back into France about 50 years later. So Charles Martel, the Battle of Tours would be about 730. Don't quote me on this, but it's about that sort of time. And he chased them out of France down to Spain once more. But they came back into southern France in 780 or 790. And they were chased out of France again by William of Orange. And not very many people know that William of Orange, the kings of Holland, they're known as the kings of Orange, the princes of Orange. They came from southern France. So the Dutch came from southern France, from the city of Orange in southern France. And that's why even today in Holland, their princes are called the princes of Orange. And that's why all of their celebrations are orange in color and so on in Holland. But the princes of Orange in southern France had an independent principality going back, hundreds of years. And so there was a Prince of Orange in the 780s, 790s, who was married to Princess Orrible, with or meaning gold, so she was the golden woman again. And they were the people who kicked the Muslims out of France on the second occasion, according to Wolfram von Eschenbach. And of course, Eschenbach also wrote Arthurian legend. So we have this parallel story. And it was an interesting story because it sort of reads as being true history. I mean, a lot of people take it as being semi-mythological, this story, but it has a great deal of information and data in it, which suggests that it's based on real history. Because normally when you're reading fiction, it sort of reads as fiction quite often, especially ancient fiction. It's just not believable. But this particular story reads as real history. And so the Prince of Orange tried to battle with the Muslims, and his army was defeated. So he went to the King of France, who was Louis I, who was married to his sister. So his sister was the Queen of France. And they had a great meeting with all of his brothers there. And they were all Jewish, of course. William of Orange was Jewish. And they demanded that the king do something to kick the Muslims back out of France. And he refused. So I forget what actually happened, but he grabbed his sister by the hair, and she was the Queen of France, of course, and threatened to cut her head off if Louis I didn't do something. So they gathered an army together eventually, and they rode off down to kick the Muslims out of France for a second occasion in the 780s, 790s AD. So yeah, that was a big epic tale, one of the chansons of the epic chansons of France, which parallels the Arthurian story quite closely in some respects. So yes, it's amazing what you can glean from some of these ancient stories. And going back down into Italy, No, not Italy. We're going back into Egypt here. We have the Dendera zodiac. So this is a famous one. Anyone who's been down to Egypt, you'll probably have seen this. This is the Dendera zodiac in the Temple of Dendera in Egypt. And it's a classical Greek style zodiac put into the ceiling of a small room in the temple. The one that you see there now is a very rough copy. The original is in the Louvre and is actually quite well made. And this is what it looks like. And so we have the standard zodiac constellations all around the outside. Pisces, obviously, Aries, Taurus over the top here. And it's processional. And in one of my books, I think it's in my Arthurian book, The Grail Cipher, I show how this is a processional zodiac because we have two axes on here. We have an axis that runs down between Aries and Pisces, and another axis that runs between Taurus and Aries. So they're marking out the precession of the equinox on this zodiac. So again, they're looking at the heavens and they're tracking the precession of the equinox. One of the reasons for doing this is it gives you a calendar. It gives you a millennial calendar. So anyone who was associated with cattle would be before 1750 BC. So if you see the Apis bulls of Egypt or the Minoan bulls of Crete and so on, you know that that is prior to 1750 BC. If you see anything to do with sheep and shepherds, then you know it's post 1750 BC in the era of the great month of Aries. So things like Alexander the Great wearing the horns of a ram, Ptolemy III wearing the horns of a ram, Moses wearing the horns, the biblical patriarchs all being shepherds. It's all to do with Aries. And then we come on to Pisces, of course, and anyone to do with fish is post AD 10. So the symbol of Christianity being the fish, Jesus being a fisher of men. In Arthurian legend, the line of the Fisher Kings, we know that they're all from the 1st century onwards because they identify with Pisces.
This was the public hour. For full access of the entire interview, please join our Patreon community. Thank you.